The purpose for fund codes is to track your fundraising efforts in terms of how much money has been raised for projects and general expenses. Every gift and pledge that is entered into your data must have a fund code. A great example is the general fund, or whatever your organization calls it. You will certainly have a fund code that represents that fund. It then allows you to determine at any time how much money has been raised for that fund. But of course, you'll have others. If you were building a new building, for example, you could create a fund code for that. Other examples might be staff members who raise personal support, health clinics, equipment, etc. Any reason for fundraising can become a fund code. It's easy to confuse fund codes with appeal codes. Remember, appeal codes track your fundraising efforts, but fund codes track the reason for the money. You may have many fundraising efforts that raise money for a special fund. You might hold a golf tournament that raises money for the new building. You might have a special letter campaign that raises money for the new building, etc. The golf tournament and letter campaign are appeals. The new building is the fund. Fund codes very often parallel your accounting system, although that's not required. Your accounting system usually tracks funds, so the concept is similar. Fund codes allow you to run a report from time to time to determine how much money has been raised this month, for example, for the new building fund. You can create a new fund code in one of two ways. The easiest is to go to the plus sign at the top of Denari and then click on New Fund from the Quick Items menu. You can also click the plus sign and then again click on the fund codes in the codes column. This will bring you to a list of your existing fund codes. You can edit one of those by finding the one that you want and then clicking on it to open it. You can also click Add New from this page to create a new code, and we'll do that. The first field at the top is the description field. This field is for you. It describes to you and your coworkers what this code is about. So using our new building example from earlier, we might type building fund here. Across from that, we find the code field. This field is the identifier for Denari. It tells Denari that this fund is different from any other, so it must be unique. You can't have two fund codes the same. Some people prefer to keep this pretty simple, and in our example, we might simply enter BF here for building fund. Some users, however, have a strategy for their codes. For example, they might start all of their personal fundraising for staff codes with a PF, then give each one a number, so their codes might be something like PF 100, PF 101, etc. Another type of fund might start with a different letter or set of letters followed by numbers. This can be helpful in reporting, since we could use that to produce a list of gifts, for example, that have fund codes that run from PF 100 to PF 500. But from Denari's perspective, the only requirement is that it be unique. The description and code fields are the only two required fields on the page. We could stop here if that's all we need, but let's discuss the other fields on the page, starting with department. A department is a grouping function for fund codes. We could, for example, create a department called personal fundraising and then link all the staff member fund codes into that department by selecting it here. The big advantage is that this can make reporting a little easier. If we have 20 staff members, we could simply get a list of gifts to the personal fundraising department rather than having to use the PF 100 to PF 500 filter we looked at earlier. Either method works. It's just a little easier using a department code. Of course, you will need to create a department code prior to setting up your fund code. That is covered in the video on that topic. The Cancel checkbox allows you to close or cancel this code. Checking the box means it is closed. This prevents someone from linking a gift to this code by mistake. It also makes the list of fund codes in gift entry shorter and easier to manage. The Sales Revenue checkbox allows you to indicate that any gift to this fund is really a sale and is non-charitable. You might set up a fund code called book sales if you were selling books. You can record the revenue in Denari by linking those sales to this fund code. Let's talk about the next two fields, restricted and insulated, together. Both have no specific definition in Denari. Therefore, you can define them in any way you want. Let's say that you decide to define restricted as being funds that can only be used for the new building as opposed to funds that are intended for the building but could be used for other things if needed. Checking this box will allow you to get a list of just those restricted gifts later. The notes field can be used for anything you want. Anything you enter here could help staff members understand what this fund is about in the future. The accounting information section relates primarily to the QuickBooks export feature. If you will not be using this feature, then you can ignore them. There's also a Peachtree export available, but we'll focus on QuickBooks here since it is the most popular. The two primary fields here are GL and GL Fund. The GL field is where you will enter the general ledger account number from QuickBooks that corresponds with this fund. In our new building example, you will have a fund in QuickBooks by the same name, and that account has a number. Simply enter that number here. The GL Fund is really the class in QuickBooks. Classes must be turned on in QuickBooks to use Denari's QuickBooks export, and you will simply transfer the class for this fund in QuickBooks to this field. Now when you run the QuickBooks export from Denari, it will produce an output file using this information. You will then import that file to QuickBooks. For more information on this process, you can view the video on that topic. The last field on this page is the admin percentage field. It also relates to the QuickBooks export process. Some organizations have decided that a percentage of any money raised for some funds will be applied usually to the general fund. Let's say that 5% of any personal support money raised will go to the general fund. Simply enter a 5 here. And during the QuickBooks export process, you will enter the account number and class where that 5% will be deposited in QuickBooks. Denari will then do the math and produce an output file with those amounts, and it will then be imported in QuickBooks in that way. If you don't need this admin percentage field, you can simply leave it blank. Now, to complete the fund code setup process, simply click Save at the top of the page in the button bar. This completes this video on fund codes. If you have any questions, please contact tech support by clicking the Help button here at the top of the page and then clicking on Support.